Well, let's get started. Welcome to Talk by Flying Arts. This is an important conversation about the future of arts in the regions. Now, Flying Arts was established by Mervyn Moriarty AM 54 years ago to connect artists, educators and communities, offering equitable and affordable access to high quality arts and cultural services and resources across Queensland. Merv's pioneering spirit lives on in Flying Arts, where today we continue to service our regional, rural and remote communities. And just as Merv believed, Flying Arts is so important. Creativity should never be out of reach for people in regional areas. The impact of university program closures, ATAR scaling and economic pressures are all affecting regional Queensland, leaving communities without pathways for creative education and expression, and that's so sad. Together we have a chance right now to change the outcomes for our future Queensland communities. And as Bree said, we have a wonderful panel behind me, so I think we should continue this important conversation with them. So I want to introduce them all to you. Firstly, Gina Fairfax AC, Joint Cultural Patron of Flying Arts with Tim Fairfax AC. Chris Sains, Director Quagoma. John Honeywell, Artist, Flying Arts Alumni. Rosina Moore, President, Queensland Arts Teachers Association. Please make them all welcome. Now, Gina, I'm going to start with you. Funding philanthropy, it's just vital, isn't it? From a philanthropic perspective, what are the biggest opportunities to support arts development in regional Queensland?
Well, first of all, can I just say how delightful it is to be here? And Tim and I are honoured to be the cultural, not ambassadors, I'd call it patrons. I was going to say ambassadors, but I'll leave that to somebody else. We are just in a very fortunate position to be able to get out and meet communities in rural areas, which we absolutely love. And we all know that the arts is just so beneficial in many ways for well-being, getting communities together. I think it's vital that we get out there and listen to what they've got to say, support them, and the opportunities are there. We're fortunate to be able to get out to meet them, and we love doing that. So that's a great benefit for us, knowing when we're going to be able to, or where we'll fund them, and listening to the communities is so important, and the people that are out there.
And when you're looking at potential projects, I mean, how do you decide that a particular project is going to have the impact that you want in those communities?
I guess it's hoping that you get the right people in those communities that are really, most of them are very active they want to do the best they can in their communities, and they want to be able to give what, I think the people
have a real love for it.
Yes, and I've got to find the champions out there and hope that it's not the same volunteers all the time, because you know that does get very wearing for communities. And but yes, you've got to make sure that they're active in their community. Most of them are. They're always very keen to get out there and want to. They need support. They need mentoring sometimes. They want to listen to what we can help them, if they can help us, doing health checks and things, and finding out what sort of support that they get.
So it's a big thing, isn't it, to get out there and to make that decision, because it's a vital decision. How much does that weigh on you? Because you've got to make the right decision, haven't you, for something to support?
Well, we've got a very good engine room, I must say, with our project managers and CEOs. So we're very fortunate in that, and they do a lot of the work, of course, and listening to the submissions, and that's really what it's. We're very lucky that we've got them. We probably have the nice bit being able to get out there and just hear them, but they do a lot of the back work.
And what is it then about the Flying Arts that why you want to support them and help the Flying Arts Alliance?
Well, we lived in a rural area for about 20 years, and Merv Moriarty used to visit Monto. Not that we ever did, we were creative enough to need him, but he did fly around, I think, from 1971 to 83 or something like that, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And what he did for those communities, finding people that are creative in those it was just wonderful.
Yeah, seeing that firsthand is fabulous,
Yes.
and that really gave you that sort of love and appreciation, did it, for why it's needed?
Absolutely,
out
yes.
there.
He was an amazing person that started up that flying arts.
Yeah. Well, what role does private support play alongside public funding to make sure that access to arts is equitable?
Well, I think it's very important. Public funding, as we know, is very necessary, and I think where philanthropy can help is sometimes they can get in and maybe support something or take a risk, and then let the public funding know, the communities, the councils, the local governments, and if they see it's working, then sometimes they can collaborate and we can do it together, which is wonderful.
Yeah, which spreads the dollar further, so
That's
they
right,
say, doesn't it?
Well, that's important. That's what it's all about, getting the dollars out there.
Chris, I'm going to come to you now because partnerships are key when we're talking about that type of thing. Major cultural institutions play a big role in our communities and in those connections. But how can major galleries and institutions really support and collaborate with regional artists and communities?
Maybe a good thread to pick up from Gina's commentary around leveraging private support. We've certainly had the great privilege over a long time now leveraging support from the Tim Fairfax Family Foundation, particularly for our smaller touring scale exhibitions like after an APT, we take APT children's projects around. So we call it Art on Tour or APT on Tour. And on the last occasion that we did that, I think following APT, which would have been 10, we reached 200 different venues. 30,000 kids were involved, and we went to every single sort of government shire and segment of the rural and remote Queensland community, every one of them. And that's just taking the funds that Tim and Gina have generously supplied through their foundation and then converting it into an experience which goes on for about 5 or 6 months as it tours the state into every single corner of the state, including the Torres Strait. So we're very proud of that. But in broader terms, how do major institutions like our own get involved in this space? We've been involved since the 1900s. And we were founded 130 years ago. The very first outreach work we ever did, and it took this event for me to learn this fact, was in the early 1900s. And then we did an amazing thing, and just to bring antiquity into the room, there's nothing like show and tell on radio, but this is an exhibition of Australian art that went from the Queensland National Art Gallery, as we were then known, in 1951. And I happen to know a bit about this, not because I worked on it, just putting that on the record, but because when I first worked in the galleries in the 80s, I did work on a plan that the then director Raoul Mellish had to reinstate this train idea. So I did a lot of research and work. It ended up, the tracks weren't as complete in the 80s as they were in the 50s.
Right.
So we couldn't do it, we couldn't get to enough sidings. But the plan was get a couple of carriages, put 50 odd, there was 51 works of art because this celebrated Federation. Our Australian Federation, it was then 51 years of age. And we took out some of the very best of our collection on that journey. I think 120 odd thousand people saw it over 9 months, which kind of gives me other ideas, but what we do is send shows out. We've done that since the 70s, and we've done it regularly, and we've got 2 on the road at the moment, a self-portrait show and a Joe Furlonger show, both of which are in action around the state, a couple more venues each, I think, to go. We also lend works of art to major exhibitions. Rockhampton recently had a very big Luke Roberts show, and taking the boy back home, because Luke was an alpha boy. It was so exciting to be present at the night of that opening and see all the locals pour in. I think Luke is a guy that stretches credulity a bit for local farmers up in Townsville and Monto and Alpha and so on. But they were just so, the whole family. There was a parade at the end of that exhibition where every member of Luke's extended family, probably 20 years ago, didn't really want to have him at the Christmas party. All of a sudden, he was the king of the room. And so all that work we lent to that show, it was quite a big tranche of works. I could not have felt more proud. Connecting this wonderful artist back to his own community, and for him, I think it's the exhibition of his lifetime. To be, you know, prodigal son returns, and it was such an amazing event. We do lots of other things as well, and I'll come to some of them in other answers, but I wanted to say this has been something that we've done historically, but and we're continuing to do, and I would like to see that continue and flourish into the future as well.
Is there a volume 2 of that book?
No, but look, that one didn't get off the ground.
Oh.
But, you know, I've got other ideas.
Okay,
We'll
good.
come to them later.
That's good. Well, what other kinds of things, what kinds of infrastructure or investment do regional arts communities need?
Yeah. Well, they certainly need good buildings, and they need good buildings, and more have become upgraded in recent years. We all know that HOTA opened a couple of years ago now, maybe 4 or 5. We've had plans around a new museum for Cairns, of course, at the courthouse precinct. We've been involved in supporting the development of the design for Cairns, and most recently on a very small scale, and it's not a government-funded museum, but it's a kind of trust-funded museum, the wonderful Quampi that's been established out on Minjerribah on North Stradbroke Island. One of my colleagues, Simon, who's here this morning, was very involved in making sure that they got the internal climate controls absolutely perfect to be able to borrow off us, or for that matter, other institutions with collections they need to be very careful of. So security needs to be taken into account, climate control to look after the works needs to be taken into account. And here they are, this tiny gallery with a gallery space, a display space, not a lot bigger than the floor area here. They can show, you know, our best Emily Noire's or something. So it's really exciting to be involved in these projects, and we do 1 or 2 times a year, one of us or another is involved in giving advice to the development of those spaces. That's helps us get more of our collection into those communities as well.
Yeah, so you're strengthening that metropolitan and regional connection.
Yeah.
We obviously need more of that, don't we?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Well, we're helping create more capacity, and I'm really pleased that it seems in the last 5 to 10 years, regional governments have decided it's time to upgrade a facility which, frankly, in Rockhampton was terrific in the 70s and 80s when Mayor Pilbeam developed this amazing collection of modernist art for Rocky. And then all of a sudden, in its brick veneer home, it didn't look as good, 40 years later. So they've built the Rockhampton Museum of Art now with a wonderful young director there. And that particular museum is a bit of a mini-me Goma because it was designed by the same architectural team, so a lot of the detailing is like that. But for a regional museum, hotter at one end of the state, that at another, soon to be a new Cairns museum, we hope, that's given us a tremendous capacity to do more and more often in those central coastal museums. But we work in Winton. I was involved in a project out at Winton a little while ago called Artists Exchange and got to see what they've done at the Walsing Matilda Centre.
Yes,
I mean, there's a lot of great spaces around the state. We can't help them all always, but we can send staff out, give them advice. Often professional development advice is a big part of what we do. At Logan at the moment, we're helping with a training program for volunteer guides. So we're not just putting paintings on walls, we're putting people and expertise into place, and we're running some of our programs, design tracks and others I might return to later. Those programs really help to activate our connection into the bush, into regional Queensland.
You mentioned all the kids before.
Yeah.
What was the reaction from those kids?
Oh, fabulous. I would say the 30-odd thousand that went to the APT touring program that we did, we get gorgeous kind of cards and letters and postcards back from students that are involved. So much happiness per square inch, really, as they work in quite modest ways with the material that we send them, but which gives for them and for their teachers, it's an instant half-day workshop. And they get to play in council chambers or wherever that can be easily set up, or in schools. And we go to Indigenous knowledge centres. We go to really remote galleries, probably the furthest one away, Gabtui from us on Mornington Island. Those are little bits of happiness and bits of joy that we can bring into young children's lives. And I mean, the work that Merv did, got to say, groundbreaking, pioneering. I knew Merv back in the 80s. Pat Hoffey's a very dear friend of mine. worked so hard so long in the same footsteps that John has trod. This brings art to communities that otherwise have an absolute scarcity of it. Merv would fly into properties and all the adjacent property folk would come in and do pottery workshops or printmaking workshops. This is a gift to Queensland that we've all got to keep treasuring and building on.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring John in now. John Honeywell, flying arts alumni, professional artist, teacher. This is your passion. What is needed to strengthen, arts in those regional communities, particularly for our future artists?
As I've lived in Brisbane since the 80s, I don't feel, qualified to give that in a sense from the ground. But I have, won that experience of Mervyn starting off in the early 70s. I was in Bundaberg. I went to Bundaberg. I only started teaching at the high school there when I was 20, so I was very young, and just happened to start going along to Mervyn's workshops which were 4 a year, and we ended up having them at Bundy High, as it was called. And so, that was such a rich experience, him and Bala Aveni, then later on Roy Churcher. And I was thinking during the week what an extraordinary thing it was having teachers of that calibre come to us. And a thing that's kind of forgotten, I think, a little bit, is that sometimes Mervyn would bring national artists with him. And my memory is that Fred Williams went on a Western tour, John Olsen did, Keith Luby, who was very prominent at the time. So those artists would come to us and give a talk. My memory is on a Friday night. So for the 12 years that I was in Bundaberg, what it created for me, the thing that I realised during the week, and this is not answering your question directly, but the thing that did is that it brought together a lot of young people who are interested in more of a contemporary approach to making art. Didn't have to be, but then a small gallery was established that we all exhibited in each year. And for someone who, if I'd stayed in Brisbane, I imagine I would have felt probably, too threatened to even approach the idea. But it created this supportive environment where we all started exhibiting, and many of us still do to this day. And there was a young writer on the Newsmail, the local newspaper, who started supporting us, giving us reviews. So the thing that was very rich, and I think this comes to, every region would continue today, is that it created a community. And looking back, I think that's what is really very special. And people that, I remain in contact with, even though I haven't been there. People like Jennifer McDuff, whose daughter is the director of the Bundaberg Regional Gallery, and Jennifer received an OAM, I think it was last year, for a contribution to the arts in that community. But that's a very special thing that I carry, apart from the education and experience with these artists. And I remember, which just popped into my head last night, of coming down to Brisbane and visiting Merv in his studio, and I was just so delighted or relieved that there were some paintings that didn't work.
Oh, really?
Because, that he would have been working on. But as opposed to that thing of, a very young painter, you think everything they're going to do is perfect. So, that I owe an extraordinary amount to those years and to the flying school and to all of those people, but also to that community that we created. In recent time, I taught for up until 2017, so, but all through my life, that Bundaberg thing has popped up for some reason. Everyone seems to have some connection to Bundaberg, and a lot of the people that I taught then have ended up being full-time artists and so on, or involved in the arts. And so, the thing that But in recent years, in the last 8 years, in having experience with various regional galleries, exhibiting with them, like what you say with Rockhampton, the Tweed, having relationships with Ipswich, fabulous gallery, Bundaberg, Mackay, and going to those centres and just seeing, how those regional galleries have a small staff and yet punch so far above their weight with what they achieve and what they contribute. So, you're going back to your question.
I wonder, I can't remember it. But it's so fascinating to hear you talk about that and talk about you meeting Mervyn and seeing all that, because what do they say? You can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And this is so important when we're talking about the regional arts. But what are the challenges now that are faced, that they're facing there? Because we want the future to be strong.
If I'm qualified, which I'm not, but I think it's the same in that, one, is there a supportive community? And from what Gina does and Tim and what Craig Goma does through Chris's programs, all of those things are powerful things. And the regional galleries that exist throughout the state now are powerful things which I imagine have incredible influence. As far as the individual, I would imagine, just going through my own experience, that the workshops that can be provided both by Flying Arts and through regional galleries and within the community, I imagine that, just when I've been thinking during the week that connections that Flying Arts can make, I presume they already have with regional galleries, could be a very powerful tool. But that thing of then exhibiting, because you make art and you want to exhibit it. You want to exhibit it initially to your community. And then beyond that, how do you then, if you had those kind of desires to exhibit to a larger community? And I was looking, there's a Townsville artist, Ron McBurney, whose son, Jonathan, is the director of the father and daughter, father and son, it's interesting, whose son is the director of the Rockhampton Museum of Art. But he's extraordinary in that he's in energy. He lives in Rockhampton, but has currently got, with a group of artists, including the Sydney artist Ewan McLeod, a fabulous exhibition of on plein air. And so that initiative that artists can generate themselves to exhibit, not just within their community, but through other regional galleries, and through the program that Flying Arts have, where you can exhibit in Brisbane through Flying Arts. It's those things of, it's hard being an artist of any kind. You get a lot of knockbacks, but if you just keep going, and with the support that is provided by the institutions. But I think that thing of community, I went to an opening of an artist that I taught with and exhibited with in Bundaberg, Marvin Nash, who was going to be here today, but she texted me last night saying she couldn't make it. She lives in Mullaney. I went to an exhibition of hers recently in Mullaney, and the thing that struck me about that regional area was just the amazing amount of kind of community and love. It was a very special thing. So I think it doesn't always have to be, I have to show in Brisbane or Sydney and so on. It's acknowledging, one, what that community can provide, and then going from that point, depending on what the artist wants.
Yeah, you're right about the displaying of art, and we've recently seen it at 1 William Street with the art being displayed there, and getting it back into the city so that people can see what is out there. I want to go to Rossi Moore now, because Rossi is a teacher and has a lot of experience here in this field. And of course, creativity often, it begins in the classroom really, doesn't it? And we have to foster that. But how can schools better integrate arts education in those regional communities? What needs to be done? Because they've got the passion, but maybe they drop off if it's not there.
Thank you. So just to give a bit of context, I originally grew up in Dirranbandi, southwest Queensland, and went to a one-teacher school. My mother was the teacher at Hebel State School, so there were 5 students when I started. And the thing that you learn about living in a regional community is that country connection, which is so satisfying when you find that country connection when you're on an overseas flight and you find somebody who's from Dirranbandi or...
And they know everybody that you know.
That's exactly right. So what I think I've always then done in my role as a teacher is I've lent into that community connection. It's so important to find who those people are within your community who are the yes people. I don't want to talk to the no people.
Yeah.
They're the creative champions within your community. So people within council who are working with youth and arts, people within your school. There might be a maths teacher who has a secret dance ability that you didn't know about, that you must capitalise on in that space. Indigenous elders within your community. Also your students. Working in Charters Towers, I was lucky enough to work at a boarding school, and we had a lot of students coming in from Palm Island, from Papua New Guinea. And I learnt a lot from those students because they were able to integrate their various stages of cultural knowledge, as well as students who had no cultural connection, and create beautiful moments in our school context. Another thing that I learnt was connecting with the community. So it is important that we bring people into communities, but it is also important that we acknowledge the creativity and the skills that everyday people within regional Queensland already possess, and that we celebrate that. So one great example of that were the people that I connected with at Towers Arts. They were lucky enough to have the School of Arts building, which was built in the 1900s. Lots of ghosts in there. And that space was amazing because, prior to that it was being disused, and now we had people from the community, and so many of them would say, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative, but they were. They had that creative way of thinking, and I learnt a lot from those people about life, about how to connect with others, and about how to make art as well. One of the great things too were a lot of those people were ex-educators, and so if we were doing anything with the schools, it was so easy to use their skills because they knew how schools worked, they knew how students worked, and it just made that whole process of connecting a lot easier. I think when you work in a regional community as well, you need to be extremely flexible and open-minded. We need to educate our leaders, our school leaders, about the importance of what is happening because they might not understand it, and that's okay. Because you might have, for instance, I had ABC Open, Michael Bromage approached the school and he said, gosh, it's really hard to connect with Queensland schools. I've worked in Victoria before and it's so much easier. For whatever reason, there's a bit of a gatekeeper sort of culture sometimes in schools, and that's because we're trying to protect our students, we're trying to protect our time, and we're trying to protect the quality of what's happening in that space. So it's really important that we connect with organisations like Flying Arts who work with teachers, because we trust teachers in schools. We trust that there needs to be that element of trust, I think, when you're opening your doors to another organisation coming into that space.
But does arts education have the priority it deserves at the moment in the curriculum? I heard some mumbles over there. Don't get us started.
I'm really glad you brought up that that moment, because there is a cultural bias that is occurring in schools at the moment with subject scaling, where it is prioritising STEM subjects and it is not giving worth to humanities and the arts.
So therefore, students, when choosing their subjects for a future career, they'll drop arts because it's not going to get them where they want to be. So how do we change that?
We need to get rid of subject scaling, and that's not to say that we don't value STEM subjects anymore, but there needs to be a level playing field. Schools, our communities, I'm preaching to the converted here, but they need to understand the value of arts and the value that the capital that it has beyond just your job. Those people that I was working with at Towers Arts, many of them were doing it for their own personal mental health. Living in Dirranbandi, a lot of funding that was received were based on projects that were assisting with the mental health of people, because coming into town and connecting with others was the thing that was keeping them going in those tough times. So that sometimes that creative idea, it's just an excuse to get together.
I think if anybody wants to add something here, particularly when we're talking about that education thing, because that is a real roadblock, isn't it, for many students and for taking the career further. We're saying we need something done, but how does that happen? Bree?
I think it's a disaster what's happened, and you've been very calm about it, because it's a systemic failure at the education curriculum setting, ATAR setting standards across all states and jurisdictions that have run education departments. And they're basically taking the humanities away, inch by inch. Look at what's happening at the moment at the ANU, but there are many other examples. And essentially all of the coursework that's being credited is the coursework that takes you directly into what's seen as a vocational outcome. There are so many vocational outcomes from arts teaching and the skills that arts give to people, as well as the humanities more broadly. So we're just becoming dumber as we try and put out more people who are engineers or lawyers or work in some technocratic field. And in the meantime, we're not thinking about the value of the arts, which seem to have sustained us as a civilization for thousands of years. The things that most last aren't last week's invention. They're shrines, they're churches, they're pyramids. You know, the great surviving vestiges of cultural history that still stand today when everything else is forgotten, all come from a study of the past and a codifying of the present in terms of what things mean to a community, whether it be in faith terms or in symbolic terms and so on. All of this, as it disappears out of our curriculum, is not training our children's generation into understanding the purpose, the value, where everyone in this room, and I'm sure everyone listening, believes in the value of the arts. They believe that the arts matter, or we wouldn't do the work we've done. And it's a nonsense to say that studying arts, whether it's animation, visual art, whatever it might be, that there are too few routes or paths to go down. I suppose animation is probably a very productive path at the moment. But in terms of visual arts, there are people in my own institution that probably have 100 different qualifications in 100 different fields, because that's what you need to run a big state art museum. They're not all curators.
Yes.
Everyone thinks, oh, I want to be a curator. Well, my God, be a conservator. There are so mmany vocations that the arts can prepare you for. And sorry, I'm on a rant now, but I just feel that,
Well,
we need to be more passionate about it because it's a problem.
Well, we need to be more passionate so that we can translate that passion to the kids that are going further. You wanted to say something, John?
There is that aspect of people assume that you'd only take the arts if you want a career. And that notion of scaling, at the school that I taught at for many years, when I left, there was 3 Year 12 classes. Due to scaling, there's one.
Yeah.
But the thing that I always stress with parents and students that, it isn't about taking art to become an artist or have necessarily a career in art. I can remember one remarkable year where there was this group of fabulous girls who all got the sevens or whatever it was at that period. It was in the early 2000s. And they all said, they did science and maths and so on as well. They all became doctors, and some now are specialists, the ones I've kept in contact with. But they all said that coming to the art room was their saving grace of getting them through school.
Yes.
And something that they would carry with them, and I know they have.
That's so true.
So
we talked about the mental health thing before, didn't we, Bree? Yeah, and that comes to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
They would come, we had a fabulous time, they worked hard, they were creative, but I knew they weren't going to be, take art as a career, but it was important to them.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of wider holistic view of education that currently is becoming so narrow is a real, as we've heard, problem.
Bree, if we look at the future of arts education then, and we are evolving with technology, community partnerships, professional development we've talked about, but that technology issue, I mean, how's that affecting things?
Yeah, I mean, we had to get Telstra when we moved to Mullaney. I thought I was moving to civilization coming to the southeast corner from North Queensland. So there is concerns, obviously, with the reliance on Starlink and Elon Musk to provide, sorry, it's not just him, but to provide, accessible internet that and access to people in regional Queensland. So that is a concern. It's so important to have that link. Ever since COVID, things like Zoom have made it possible for me to be president of Queensland Art Teachers Association from Mullaney. And I can be flexible with my 3 young children and be a part of that and have that connection and know and be heard as well, which is really important for people in regional areas because you can feel very isolated and you can feel like very alone. So having that connection is really important. We have a lot of programs that are online. For example, we run In the Studio, which is similar to another program that Flying Arts have done before, where we are specifically talking to artists that relate to our Queensland textbook. We also have an In the Classroom series that we're wanting to promote within classrooms, where we actually hear from educators themselves, because there's so much knowledge that our educators have, and we need to bridge that gap with really experienced educators and get as much knowledge as them from that as we can.
Well, I suppose if they're dropping the subject, we're not getting the educators, are we?
That's right. And so there's you're continually asked, I guess, to be flexible. Combine your classes, teach multiple classes in the one class, because the only alternate option is then there are no classes. Then we lose that expertise. It's not only happening in schools, it's also happening in universities where there are smaller and smaller offerings for students, and then those expertise are being lost as well. And it's not like we can just overnight get those expertise back. It takes time. I've been teaching for over 10 years and I still am learning constantly from my colleague. And it's just the little things, I guess, that you don't really think about, the logistics of how you run a classroom, let alone all of the other things that come with working with young people.
So then as a teacher in a field that you love, how do you see the future of regional arts then, and what needs to be done?
We need to continue to connect, to organisations like Flying Arts, like the Queensland Art Teachers Association. You only have to look at our Facebook feed to see the vast number of things, questions that people have. We need to have access to good quality resources within our classrooms. We need to have good quality internet access so that we can access people. We need to have good quality artists, educators coming into our regions as well. So we have another program called In-Reach Outreach. For instance, Phoebe Paradise. She got rave reviews at our conference last year, and so then we sent her out to Rockhampton Regional Gallery and also Ipswich Gallery, so that teachers are getting that access as well.
What are the resources like? You mentioned you need more resources.
I guess we are able to create resources on our own, but we need arts organisations, when they are connecting with us, to understand the curriculum as well. So we want to connect in with, I guess we want to make sure that we're utilising the infrastructure that we already have. So our regional art galleries and museums, but we need there to be sort of that thing, the bridge between those two institutions. So it's not necessarily more resources, but it's that if we are connecting with others, there needs to be that mutual understanding of what's happening in the classroom so that we can make quicker, better quality decisions.
Yeah. Because you would also see that passion there among the kids, wouldn't you?
Sorry?
You would also see the passion that the kids have for this, and if it's not sort of available to them, if it's cut off, I mean, what are the kids saying to you? What do you see when you're teaching them?
They definitely, so I'm definitely learning things from my students all of the time, so I think we need to ensure that we give value to the knowledge that students already have and give confidence as well to our educators. Because it's not always, I guess, about you having to do more. We need to empower people and let them understand that they are enough. But we need to, I guess, give them the tools of how to get there.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about me teaching them. And, you know, a little bit of it is broadening their horizons and letting them understand that there are other people that think in that way, and that's the beauty of living in a place like Mullaney. There are parents of my students who work in the creative industries. That wasn't happening for me when I was up in North Queensland, and so that context is slightly different. So we do need to, I guess, allow students to interact with other like-minded students as well. So having programs, for instance, one of my students has just been accepted to the Artist in Residence by Goma from Mullaney, and that's going to be an amazing opportunity for her. She has a pathway to become an artist. Her mum is an artist, which is, you know, really lucky for her. But that's going to be really exciting for her to hang out with other students who think like her.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I want to ask the question that I did ask to you about your hope for the future of regional arts in Queensland to the rest of the panel, and just have a think about that. What is that hope for the future in Queensland of the regional arts communities? John, we'll start with you.
More.
More?
The more the better. I was thinking as, well, the first thing as when you were just talking, I also thought about, you know, of students that I taught where it was the only thing they had. It was so important. And if they were a little bit outsider, and, you know, I was on state panel, and you'd see work come across where you could just tell that the art that they were making was so important. And so if it's excluded or encouraged to be excluded in schools, what is happening to those students? So the future, that the arts, the whole arts become inclusive as possible, that our access becomes as accessible, that, you know, support and connection within small and larger communities, and opportunities that come, you know, once those, that kind of allowance of being an art maker of whatever kind, being that interested in the arts, that there's a sense of it being permissible and that beyond that, there's then opportunities to go from that
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
So community, connection and opportunities. Probably.
Wonderful. Chris, what do you think the hope for the future
It's
is?
a complicated question. I think
Sorry.
I begin where I left off a minute ago about value, the value that the arts bring. You mentioned well-being. That's something that museums like ours are pivoting toward and have been for more than a decade now, in terms of creating bespoke programs for people with different levels of ability and disability, and that's something that's been truly happening globally now. I was at a recent conference in March this year, where the whole focus of one quarter of that conference was about the value of the arts in terms of building that sense of belonging, well-being, community connection. Many of the themes we've already touched on. But I think the other one is we have a social cohesion crisis in this country. It's not going to be solved by technology. In fact, technology's probably done more harm than good in that way. The arts are an area where we can all stop to reflect upon ourselves, our values, where we stand in relation to things. I finished a book the other night in tears. Well, you know, I wasn't reading a magazine about bridges. So the arts connect us deeply into ourselves and cause us to remember and recall things that have really mattered in our lives and in our family and friendship circle and so on. So I think whether it's happening in regional Queensland or whether it's happening in the broader country, I think that the visual arts, which flying arts ostensibly, now that's their primary focus, I think it's getting back to what Rosina and John have said really powerfully. It's getting back to, through children and through young people, that's where change lives. It really isn't living in my generation. It's going to live in their generation. My kids and their kids is where change can come. And I think that if we, first of all, reverse engineer what's been happening to the kind of erosion of the value of arts in the education system, it literally puts points against things, and now we're paying what used to be paid for legal degrees is now paid by arts degrees. Oh, give me a break.
Yeah.
Do we really need the same libraries? Do we really need the same physics rooms for the science students that cost as much as they cost? For the arts, no. It's a relatively low-cost zone in which to teach. Many areas of it at least are. And I just think doubling fees is deliberately designed to disincentivise kids from actually going into those pathways. And if we are going to build a better and more civil society and a far more socially cohesive one than we have right now, I think the power of doing it at the relatively low cost of investment in the arts is a great way of making progress for the future.
And yeah, you're right, we need to listen to the kids. We make decisions for them, don't we?
Yeah.
But we must
That's
listen
where
to them.
Rosina was spot on,
Yeah.
you know? Listening to the people that are going to be in the positions like many of us may be in 10, 20 years' time is incredibly important. And I love that idea about the art room as a space of refuge. It was mine.
Yeah.
I've forgotten about that. But it was really the only place I really liked going was the art room. We had a
That's
very
so true.
cool teacher, I'm sure, just like John and Rosina. And she inspired me.
Yeah.
And we all know that the people that teach us, in our, whether it's high school or tertiary, we tend to go in the directions that they kind of end up suggesting to us are our true passions in life.
Yeah.
And so don't estimate the investment into education, don't estimate the investment into getting artists out into those communities and sharing that inspiring talk that I'm sure Fred Williams would have gave. You know, I'd remember it for a lifetime if he spoke to my class.
Yep.
So I think they're just small incremental ways. We can't just throw money in, we've got to have good ways of using that money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gina, what's your hope for the future of regional arts in Queensland?
Well, I don't know what happened to STEAM. It's always STEM.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it's so important to have the arts out there. Exactly. I've just loved hearing everyone speaking about it, and and Rosie down there about teaching now. The opportunities are out there for us to have. I think it's wonderful that if families and students can't come to us down here to go to Goma and to go to the library and that sort of thing, and go to the QSO and all these wonderful camerata, then we go out there. We help take them out to that wonderful thing, to the country in the regional rural areas. And the other one is online, of course, is wonderful, being able to get lessons and art lessons and music lessons. I mean, I know the government is helping get music out there as well as the Moriarty art type things, which is all about creativity as well.
Yeah.
So yes, so bring on the arts.
Bring on the arts. Put the A
I
back in.
We love being
STEM.
involved with it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our wonderful panel. We're going to say goodbye to the viewers watching online. Thanks to TAFE Queensland for streaming this today. It's been wonderful to have you. Don't forget to hop onto flyingarts.org.au if you can help out the arts and find out some more information about it.